We have this one piece called A Prayer of Protest, which is a beautiful piece. It's the piece, a lot of people tell me it's the piece that makes them cry. And it's a piece that acknowledges that for some people, walking into synagogue, especially on the high holidays, is fraught. It's really a challenge for them to even walk in because they're really angry about something, and it might be because they've been sick or a loved one has been sick, or maybe they've, God forbid, lost a child, or whatever it is, they're there with a lot of angst and a lot of anger, and we want to say that's also part of the experience of being human, and that it's okay. There is room for you here. There's room for not just you sitting in the pews, but there's room for you to be having that struggle here within this context. Wherever we are, it's okay for us to be there, holding that whole spectrum of feelings and emotions with us, and it's all okay.
You embrace doubt.
Right. Yeah. We embrace doubt, we embrace anger, we embrace ambivalence, we embrace discomfort. I think that religion changes as we change. And yes, there's a timelessness to it. The big eternal questions are still the same big eternal questions that our ancestors were grappling with. But it's always in a context of people's lives. And so the lives that we're leading today, in some ways, are very different than what our great-grandparents lived or what our great whatever ancestors lived. And so it's really a blend of the two. There's this sort of, there is that timeless, like the questions about, the nature of human existence, eternality, immortality, God. I mean, all of that is, creation. What are we doing here on this earth? And, those are timeless questions. But the ways that we connect to them are often different, and certainly the details are different. The way that we make choices about our lives are different, I think, in some ways than past generations. Certainly, concerns are different. If you look at the old High Holiday Prayer Book, you understand after reading through it that the generation that created that book was first of all very close to the Holocaust, was coming out of the Vietnam War, was right after the Six-Day War. All those things, consciously or unconsciously, are reflected in the book, in the 1978 book. And I think those don't necessarily speak to us in the same way that they did to a prior generation. We have our own concerns, our own fears, our own anxieties, our own joys. And some are the same, some are very different. So there's just this constant mix of the kind of timely and timeless. I've been talking about this 1978 version, but that actually is an adaptation of the British prayer book. And the truth is that there hasn't been a completely sort of organic North American High Holiday prayer book since the 1890s, which is a really long time ago. So one of the things that we decided was this is our time to experiment. Like, if we don't do this now, when are we going to have this opportunity again? So there were a lot of things that we tried along the way because we felt like we actually have a responsibility to try. If we don't try this, if not now, when? At its most literal level, Mishkan HaNefesh means sanctuary of the soul. And our regular prayer book is called Mishkan Tefillah, which is like a sanctuary of prayer. So we wanted to keep there a connection between the two. Mishkan is a biblical word, and it's the Hebrew word for the sort of the sanctuary that the Israelites worshipped in the desert. But so there's a sense, that it's a physical place, but it's also more than that. It's a kind of state of being. It's a place that you go to connect with God and to connect with the essential parts of what we're about. It's very much about soul searching, right? And so there's also this phrase that's connected to the high holidays, which is cheshbon hanefesh, this idea of sort of this like checking your soul, doing this internal self-reflection piece of, checking in with yourself, where you are, who you are, what's going on, how are you really doing, how do you want to do better, taking that time to do that deep inner thinking. So there's a connection Cheshbon HaNefesh, Mishkan HaNefesh, there's kind of an allusion to that as well. It couldn't be Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur if you didn't have the Unatana Tokef. So it becomes that, for a lot of people, it becomes that touchstone piece. For other people, it becomes the thing that makes them want to flee because it's painful. It's actually got a theology that can be interpreted in a very painful way because it talks, again, just on one level, it talks about how, some of the bad things that happen to you in life, whether, illness or death or other kinds of suffering, are because of your own behavior, that God is doing this because of how you've behaved. So it's not theology that is comforting and embracing and sort of welcoming theology. There are lots of other ways to interpret it, and there are lots of other ways to read it and make sense out of it and understand it as, a kind of ancient attempt to make meaning out of things we didn't understand in the world. And what's our responsibility? What's God's responsibility? What's the way the world works? It's ripe with questions and possibilities and beauty, but it can be very painful as well. So Unatana Tokef can be also that sort of spiritual wake-up that shocks the system, that kind of gets you out of yourself, right? It's the text, we know it in English from the Leonard Cohen song. I think if you don't know it from a liturgical setting, you may know the Leonard Cohen version with, who by fire, who by water, who by so on. And we actually include the Leonard Cohen version in the book in one place. So it could be sung if the rabbi or cantor wanted to do it that way, because he riffed on that. He kind of created a popular culture piece out of this timeless liturgical piece. So Unatana Tokef is a very complicated text. And here, the translation of it, this is just a part of it, says, on Rosh Hashanah this is written, on the fast of Yom Kippur this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? So the ending, of the traditional one says, but through the return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. So some people really have a very hard time with that because there is this sense that these things have happened to you because you haven't done the right thing. But if you do the right thing, they won't happen to you, and that's very painful theology. One of the alternative pieces, just an excerpt from it, speaks directly to that part that I just read that says, prayer, right action, a turning toward the good, these give us hope and help us bear the pain of life. Totally different kind of theological approach to it. It still accepts that these things are going to happen, but it talks about how the actions that we take, they may not just magically make things better, but they're going to give us hope. They're going to give us a way forward when things are really difficult. So it's two different kinds of approaches that are together on a page. It's not about divine punishment. It's about more of a sense of partnership with God, and that's really what the rest of the text that I didn't read talks about. That. But it's more focused on just how we live our own lives. Who's going to be here with me next year? What's in store for me and my family? Which speaks to those human questions. We come every year, we sit in these pews, and yet every year our lives have changed, and we can really reflect on that change from year to year. Who was with us this year? Who was with us last year? Who's not with us this year? Who's going to be here with us next year? How does that cycle of the year affect us? Very based on our own reality and these big questions of change and the sort of ongoing cycle of life.